Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Oake, and I am the morning show host here at Cities 97.1, Uniquely Twin Cities. Along with my producer, Brianne, every weekday morning we're with you here, bringing you the best music we can find, the best information we can find, hopefully making that slog to work a little less difficult. But Brianne and I both sort of pride ourselves on wanting to have a good conversation, on meeting interesting people, on finding that weird intersection between music and life, that there's a reason that we all identify with it, right? And so we're about to meet someone and hear a performance from someone who does that in a way that I think most of us can only sort of dream about. You know, musical theater, I grew up loving it, participated in it a tiny little bit, but nothing like the artist we're about to meet. I don't even really know where to start to describe the artist we're going to talk to, because he's been doing it. He's not 30 yet, and he's been doing it for more than 2/3 of his life at the absolute highest level. He has received all of the awards. He is literally a star of stage and screen, and it's only moving forward. The legendary Dear Evan Hansen. It won all the awards. It was beyond a sensation, and now there's a film adaptation on the way. And I let's just start by saying hello. Can we do that? Because
Hello.
if I went through all the accolades, it would literally take all the time we have available. Ben Platt, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing? Nice to see you.
Not bad,
Good.
not bad. Because I was looking at all of what you've done and where it started. You know what? Before I get lost in trying to unravel all of it, can I just ask, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm doing good. I'm here in LA and California. They just lifted all the last restrictions today, so just happy to be vaccinated and back in the world, and I'm doing good.
Well, same. So is it weird though? Like, so when you walk outside, Ben,
Yeah.
like people don't have masks on, and it seems like it's the old times, but it also seems a little unusual.
Yeah, we're like all getting our sea legs back. Like I feel like everybody's very tentative, so you just kind of like crawl out of your house and you like share eyes with someone, and then they kind of say like you're okay, and then you kind of say like you're okay, and then we go on about our day. But it's exciting. It's so, especially to like go to a restaurant or like go shopping or just do things that used to be so mundane and like we took so for granted feel like huge adventures. So I hope that that remains the feeling for a while.
Yeah, well, and I hope that it continues to move in the right direction and people continue to get vaccinated, and
Yes.
let's get back to some semblance of normalcy. So
Hmm.
again, I could run down all the things that you've done, but I would like to know, for the people who are out there, everyone here right now that's joining us for this virtual Studio C performance for Cities 97.1 is familiar with your body of work. Literally a star of stage and screen, multiple award winner, all of it. And there's a great new film on the way that we're going to talk about. But I want to know, for you, like, I
Hmm.
know you grew up in a family that was involved in musical theater
Yeah.
and the entertainment industry, but that doesn't automatically mean you're good at it. At what point, when you were young, very young, did you realize, this, I love this, this is who I am, and this is what I want to do?
That's a great question. I started working pretty young. I did musical theater at like a kids program starting when I was like 5 years old. And my first job, I was 9 years old, and I was in The Music Man, the musical at the Hollywood Bowl with Kristen Chenoweth and Eric McCormick. And at that point, even though it was still just a joy, like it was something I just loved, and I don't think I fully had a grasp of the fact that I was good enough to maybe really do it for life. I think probably the moment was I did a show called Caroline or Change, which is a really beautiful piece that Tony Kushner and Janine Tesori wrote. That's a musical sung through all about this maid in the 60s, in the South, and the Jewish family that she is employed by. And I played the young boy, and the central relationship in the show is the boy and the maid. And it was the first show I did that was like complicated emotionally and required like a bit of a complex performance. And I think that was the first time that I like consciously made choices and like didn't just kind of go out there and be sort of a natural kid. I really like was consciously performing, and that's when I realized that I needed to be doing that at all times.
Well, and you've literally been doing it the rest of your life since then. I
Yeah.
love how casually you threw away that, oh, at 9 years old, I was at the Hollywood Bowl doing The Music Man with Kristen Chenoweth. So, oh my God. I mean, like, so you mean you've had this wonderful career. But again, what I find, for when opportunities present themselves, if you don't deliver, the opportunities stop presenting themselves. You've clearly crafted this path, and you've done you've gotten everything you deserved, but it's been wondrous to watch. I mean, this is a real evolution, literally star of stage and screen. You know, you referenced before the first role you had that had emotional heft to it, right?
Hmm.
And emotional heft is what propelled Dear Evan Hansen to the levels of dizzying success that it and you both enjoyed.
Hmm.
The combination of the right story, the right music, the right players, the right actors, the right people at the right time. And it's why it's one of the most celebrated musicals to come off Broadway in a long time. But the history goes back further than that. You started with Dear Evan Hansen well before it was an international sensation. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. So it starts when I was 17, and I auditioned for a different show that Pascal and Paul were writing, who are the composers of Evan Hansen and, of course, Greatest Showman, La La Land, blah, blah, blah. And I was too young for that show. It's called Dogfight. But they reached out to me after my audition, and they said, you know, we think you're great, and we would love to collaborate in the future, and we have this thing that's just a seed at the moment, but, you know, stay tuned. And I was like, yeah, right. But then, you know, like 3 years later, 4 years later, it was 21, 22, they did reach out and they said, we're going to do a first cold reading of this piece we've been working on. At the time, it was called Untitled Pascal and Paul Project. And they said, you know, we're going to bring you into the lead for the first reading to see what that's like. And we're not going to give you the script beforehand. We're not going to give you the songs beforehand. We're not going to tell you what it's about. You're just going to come in and do it, and we'll see what happens. So I went to that very first reading. I was there, you know, Rachel Bay Jones, who ended up in the original cast, was there. A couple of the other original cast members already there, and opened up the script, and we just read through it. And I think there was like an immediate synergy between me and the character. And I think it was very different then than it eventually became, but the seeds of the stuff was all there, and all the big songs were already there. And I think it was clear to everybody that it was quite a good match. And so I stayed on board for several workshops, readings, a production in Washington, a production off Broadway, and then finally a production on Broadway. So it was like about 4 years altogether.
And I think most people, when they do this kind of a production, right, when you're involved in this sort of artistic endeavor that has so many moving parts, we all hope for the best. And even if it feels encouraging early on, you know, you're like, well, who knows? Maybe the sky's the limit. But let's be honest, most productions don't reach those dizzying heights that Dear Evan Hansen eventually came to. At what point, when was it, even if it gets to Broadway, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be one of these, that you're going to win all the awards, that you're going to become the youngest person to ever win the Tony for Best Actor. None of that's guaranteed. At what point did you feel the tidal wave sort of pushing it all forward? You're like, oh man, there's something happening here.
That's a great question. I think twofold. The one for the show, where I realized that the piece was special. I mean, I always thought it was special personally, but I didn't think it would be necessarily very commercial, because it's pretty dark and it's very complicated and it's not a pre-existing franchise. The first time we had audiences in Washington, out of town, and you just heard like a sea of sobbing and just everybody having a full catharsis. It wasn't just that like people were moved or that there was like a certain demographic that was moved. It was like everybody from every walk of life came in and felt like emotionally changed by it. And I think as soon as we started seeing that, we were like, okay, we have something here. And then personally, in terms of the performance, I think the way that it was reviewed by Peter Marks in the Washington Post, which was like kind of the first major review we received when we were in Washington, that was the first time I realized that, because I was so in it and like in the bubble of it and thinking about the show and the character and stuff. That was the first time I realized that like career-wise, this was going to maybe have the chance to be a real moment. Just in terms of like remembering the way that, you know, Cynthia Erivo's performance was spoken about in Color Purple, or like Idina Menzel in Wicked, like things that I grew up loving, and seeing similar language and suddenly feeling like, oh, am I about to enter into that same vibe? And turns out that I was.
And indeed you were. Well, I mean, you know, and again, not trying to be overly gracious, but Grammy, Tony, Emmy, and as we all know, that leaves you one short of the coveted EGOT, right? The
It
Emmy,
does.
the Grammy, the Tony is there, but that O in the middle, the Oscar.
Hmm.
That being said, there is a film adaptation on the way of Dear Evan Hansen,
There
which
is.
people are very excited about. That is coming out later on this year, correct?
September 24th, which is actually my birthday, comes out.
Well, happy birthday in advance, and happy
Thank you.
birthday to you.
Very
Um,
weird birthday.
you know, it's interesting because I've been around enough people who do musical theater. It's very dynamic. It's very immediate. There aren't
Hmm.
any retakes. It has to be great every single time. With
Exactly.
a, with a movie, you have the luxury, or sometimes the tedium of doing it over and over and over until everybody feels you got it exactly right. With so much time, and I know this is not your first time behind in front of a camera,
Hmm.
obviously, with
Hmm.
Netflix, The Politician, and the other films you've been in. But when it comes to something as dynamic and as an important part of your life as Dear Evan Hansen, then doing a film adaptation of it, Was it enjoyable? Was it tedious? How did it differ from doing the live version?
It wasn't enjoyable in like sort of the most common definition. It was very difficult and challenging and very emotionally grating to return to that character and try to physically make myself young again and eat a little bit less and shave every day and all of that stuff and re-enter that mental space that I was kind of happy to say goodbye to as much as I loved the Evan Hansen experience. So there was a lot of challenges, but it was very, very gratifying and like sort of soul filling to get to immortalize that part of my life and sort of put it away one scene and one song at a time. And I think I really tried to see it as like sort of a final exorcism of the character and just take each beat, the thing like you were saying, each day, you do waving through a window 6 times and then that's it. You never return to it. So
Right.
I tried to just do everything I could think of with each individual song, wake up each day and think, okay, today is all about For Forever and nothing else. And this is the last time I'll sing this song. And what have I always wanted to do with it? And just throw out every option I could. And then sort of say goodbye to it. So it was very kind of therapeutic in a way. And I appreciated that we had a director, Stephen Chbosky, who was very deferential to me in terms of what I needed to create the performance, in terms of how the coverage was laid out and, did I want to perform at the start of the day or the end of the day, or how many times could I manage doing it? Or he just was very generous with that, which I really appreciated. And they let me do all my singing live as well, which I really was important to me. And so I'm excited
Well,
for that as well.
hopefully that answered Marty's question. Marty is joining us right here. Wanted to know what it was like to go back and portray a high school student these many years later. And I think you answered that like constant shaving, eating less. How do you do, fellow kids? That sort of thing.
Exactly. It was sort of like I had to, once I had done the physical things necessary, I sort of let the youth go in terms of like the performance. I think when people play young or play down, it just reads as kind of condescending to the character, or like you're not fully emotionally real. And so I let the kind of physical, the clothing and the hair and everything speak for itself and just played this guy.
Very good. Well, that movie's coming out on your birthday, September, did you say 24th?
Yes, indeed.
September 24th, later on this year, a chance for the rest of the world who maybe can't get to Broadway or get some of those higher end tickets. Once a show gets that kind of buzz, it's pretty hard to get to. Now, you have been busy with other things as well. I know that you're working on other films. I heard that you just jumped into a film project that's going to be filmed over the course of the next 20 years. Is that true?
Yes, so it's a musical called Merrily We Roll Along, which is a Stephen Sondheim musical that is being adapted to film by Richard Linklater, very brilliant director and
Brilliant director.
fantastic. And the show is written as a piece that takes place over the course of 18 years, and it's in reverse. So the show is about 3 friends whose relationship falls apart because of the business and people becoming jaded. And it's a really heartbreaking story, but it's really beautiful. And it plays, the first scene of the musical is them at their most jaded in their 40s, and then it ends with them on the roof of their college dorm, like as these hopeful, naive young people. And usually the musical gets a bit of a mixed review because you either have young people playing too old in the beginning or you have old people playing too young at the end. So Linklater's fabulous idea was to really watch us age in real time and then show it in reverse and sort of watch us return to our naive selves. So it's very ambitious, and it's a passion project for everybody because we're going to have to continue to try to make it a priority over the course of 15, 20 years. But we're trying to be in it for the long haul, and we're filming our first sequence at the end of the year.
That's crazy, though. I mean, it's fun to have a thing to look forward to, like, oh, it's been a couple of years. Oh, yeah, Richard's on the phone. It's time to get back to it. That's cool. But it's also, I'm happy for you because I think when you occupy a role as definitive as of Evan Hansen, there's always the threat of it becoming your
Calling card.
give the analogy, Luke Skywalker, right?
Yes.
Like Mark Hamill's never been allowed to be anybody else since then,
Yes.
but you've had the privilege to do other things. I mean, you had things before Evan Hansen, but when you have such a defining role, you do run the risk of that being the only thing people ever think about again. But the Politician's been good for you. You're working into other movie roles. I think it is good to immortalize it in the film, but
Thanks.
it's nice to know that you, especially at your young age, you are going to be able to continue to craft and create. And I know as an artist, that's got to be important to you.
Absolutely, and it's a huge reason why I've loved making my own original music and singing at my own perspective and my own thoughts and as my own self, is because certainly when I was coming off of Evan Hansen, I was feeling those same fears that you were just voicing and feeling like no one's ever going to see me as anything other than this anxious teenager. And so I really felt like I wanted to present who I really am and what I really feel. And so regardless of what's happening, as an actor, things come and go, and you're the hot thing one day and nobody wants to cast you the next day. But something that is always constant is my desire to sing and write. And so I think that's been a really beautiful kind of safety net for me that I can always come back to myself and sing as myself.
Well, before we hear your new single and talk a little bit about the music that you create away from the bright lights and the grease paint and all that, will you introduce your accompanist?
Of course. This is Isamu, and he's unfortunately had to play these two songs a billion times, but they're always beautiful.
Well, that's the job, though, right? I mean, that's what we do, right? We're all doing the same thing. So
I
you do it
promise him that
lovely, you
someday
do it
we'll play
beautifully.
something else.
Okay, well, that's fine. So before we get into the brand new single, though, and I am going to ask you questions about when we can expect a new record on the far side of it, but the first album came out a while ago, Sing to Me Instead. You grew up around musical theater, so clearly a lot of the music you know is informed by that. But there
Sure.
must be other artists that growing up you were profoundly impacted by. Are there other artists specifically that when you decide you're going to write, I'm like, damn, I wish I could do something as good as this person or that might impress that person? Are there other artists on your list that really inform what you do and how you approach your music?
Absolutely. I would say like lyrically and kind of narratively, emotionally, very inspired by Carole King, James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, like more recently Adele, Sam Smith, that sort of emotional kind of, there's a real theatricality, even in the folkiest and poppiest of their music. There's a real voice, like a real character's voice. And so I've always loved that. And then like vocally, stylistically, I've always loved like Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, George Michael, Stevie Wonder. Yeah, so I think it's like sort of like I'm this kind of vessel that got like filled up with show tunes as a kid, and then it got like food dye colored by all these other artists, and that's kind of where we're at.
Well, and people seem to be playing along because it seems to be going very well, which I'm very happy for. So
Thanks.
you've got the first album that came out a couple of years ago. You got a brand new single that you debuted on TikTok about a month and a half ago. Ben, you've got a new record on the way. I know that's the first single, and
Yes.
obviously I'm not trying to rush anything.
No, please.
Clearly there are other songs, and there have to be plans for a new record at some point, yeah?
Yes, there will be a record. I mean, before Labor Day. Let's just say that it's coming this summer.
That soon?
Yes, very soon.
That's
The
great.
next song will be next month, and then perhaps in the following month the record. But yes,
Okay.
I've been sitting on it for quite some time. I wrote most of it via Zoom from my childhood bedroom through the beginning of this pandemic as sort of a way to channel all this stuff that was happening. I know many people needed different outlets, and that was really mine. And I've been playing it for my family and friends for months, and just kind of waiting and waiting to share it because I'm just very, very excited and proud of it. And so I'm Imagine is a great little sort of first taste, but there's a lot more that I'm excited to share.
Fabulous. Well, Marina asked new album date, and Marina, I think that's as close as we're going to get.
Yes,
But
it is.
you know what? But hey, that's way sooner than I expected because usually first single to full length release is many, many, many moons. Also, it warms my heart that you told me you sat down and wrote that in your childhood bedroom during the pandemic because I love it when people still have a fantastic relationship with their family, which you
Hmm.
clearly must. If you hold up in your childhood bedroom, I mean that's heavy, man. That's going back to some pretty foundational stuff as you're a grown man who's internationally known.
It was sort of like that's kind of where the album was born. Was like me feeling this weird dichotomy of like being the most different and the most kind of matured that I've ever been, and then also remembering like who I was as a teenager and where I came from, and reverting to all those things, and then sort of investigating like what's never changed and what's entirely different. And I think that like the crossroads between those things and like feeling like reverting to a teenage self while being like the most sort of man I've ever been is sort of like where the album came from.
Well, it sounds fantastic, and I know that
Thanks.
there are a lot of people who are excited that's going to be coming out sooner rather than later. We'll make sure to pass that along. I do have one more important question from another member of our Zoom viewing community right here. Sarah asked perhaps the most important question of anything we've talked about so far in this virtual Studio C performance. When are you coming to Minneapolis? Are you going to tour this record now that we're back out and open and in the world?
Yes, we'll have a tour at the beginning of next year. The details are forthcoming with the album later this summer, but I certainly will, if not literally in. I don't know the exact route, but certainly very nearby.
Okay, well, very good. Well, I mean, and a lot of times, for whatever reason, people go right from Chicago south, or they go to Milwaukee, and then they just miss it completely. Understand there will be people
Idiots.
that are very. All right, last thing, and I will let you go. You're obviously very, very busy. You do a tremendous number of things, and it's wonderful to watch the evolution, to
Thank
know
you.
that you are going to have the freedom and the strength and the creativity to continue to grow as an artist for many years to come. I have to admit, I've fallen off a little bit on keeping up with The Simpsons. How did it come to pass that you got to do a cameo on The Simpsons?
They reached out to me during the pandemic and they were like, "We're going strong since our work is not, in person specific, and will you just record this little part as Lisa's like crush and then nemesis from your closet?" So I literally did it in my closet with like a mic hanging from my like the little rack. And now it was on The Simpsons. It was awesome.
I mean, you know that The Simpsons has been on television longer than you've been alive. To
I
me,
do.
that's like yeah, Tony, that's fine, Emmy, Grammy, whatever.
The
I've been on The
Simpsons.
Simpsons, yo.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's a tapestry that will never go away.
There are so many. Ben, this has been very awesome. I'm very appreciative of your time. I
Of
know that the
course.
promotion thing can be a grind, but for everybody here gathered in our virtual Studio C, and on behalf of Cities 97, I wish you all the best of luck and thank you very much. And when you do come through town early next year and come to the Twin Cities, I'd very much like it if you'd come in for a proper Studio C performance.
I would love to. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. Good
Thanks,
to talk to you.
everybody. Likewise.
Thanks, everybody, for coming to our virtual Studio C performance here with Ben Platt. And thanks to Atlantic Records for making it all come together. And don't forget, Brianna and I are with you every weekday morning from 6 until 10. Bye, everybody.